Do you remember how exciting it used to be when the Olympics were coming? You knew you were going to spend a couple of weeks just watching the Olympics, this great patriotic event. It was just so much fun. I don't know, maybe this is all just childlike fantasies we're engaged with here. But guess what? In case you haven't heard, the Winter Olympics are back in Beijing, China. And that is the topic of today's discussion. Hello, I am Jim Hale, and I am joined today by LifeSite Vice President Gualberto Garcia Jones. How you doing, Gualberto?
Good to be here with you.
And Nick Marmalejo, one of our new writers. Nick Marmalejo, it's so good to have you with LifeSite.
It's great to be here. Thank you so much, Jim.
Yes, so we need to talk about China. We need to talk about the Olympics, men, because we are about to get an avalanche. It's just going to be communist propaganda, and you're going to see all the useful idiots in the international media, with the American media leading the way, NBC, going to be telling us about, you know, how noble China is and what a great response to COVID they had, and just, you know, what a modern nation this is, and all that, with this spirit of Olympic unity and solidarity and all this. But the truth is, the reason why we are having this discussion today is to shine some light on the true nature of the Chinese communist regime, which is the biggest abuser of human rights in the world. Would that be accurate, Gualberto?
I think that's absolutely correct. And China as a nation is a great nation. They have an amazing history. Unfortunately, they are under the yoke of the Communist Party. And so for the West to just simply play the part of the propaganda arm of the Communist Party is just really sickening. And I'm so glad that at LifeSite we've decided to shine a real spotlight on the abuses from the Communist Party that they're perpetrating on their own people first and foremost, but then on the whole world, because as we all know, China is having a massive global impact. And how could anybody ignore the fact that it was their lab in Wuhan that released this pandemic that's changed the entire world?
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting, too, in that you talk about they're actually waging war on their own people. Every totalitarian regime, first and foremost, is afraid of their own people. So they have to start with propagandizing their own people and censoring their own people. Yeah,
and I think that's the really scary part to me. Obviously, I have a sense of solidarity with the innocent people in China. Certainly, we know what's happening to the Catholics in China, to the Uyghurs, to the Falun Gong members that has been going on forever. But really what we see now is this dangerous seeping of the Chinese communist way of censoring and control, and it's coming to the West as well. It's coming to the United States, to Canada, to Europe, where these same techniques of totalitarianism, really, and information control are being adopted here. And that's really, really scary.
Mm-hmm. Well, Nick, let's talk about the crimes of the Chinese Communist Party, because it is a long list.
Yeah, I mean, they could easily be at the top of the list for the number of bad things that they've done. Hundreds of millions, estimated hundreds of millions, untold number of abortions through the China one-child policy. You've got the Uyghur genocide that's been going on for decades now. And that the Uyghur population, for those who don't know, they're the like a soft, if you will, branded version of Muslims in the northwestern region of the country, and they want their own culture. They want their own level of independence within China, but that of course is not good with the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, and so the Uyghurs, who number about 10 to 11 million in population, are just relentlessly persecuted. They've got detainment camps there, and stories have been leaking out for years on the re-education camps. If you're a political adversary or viewed as a threat by the CCP, unfortunately, there's tons of human rights abuses that go on in those camps. Everything from rape, torture, people just getting disappeared. So it's a terrible place to go. So that's a huge thing that's ongoing now. And I know one of the themes of the Olympics is solidarity with their people, but they're definitely not in solidarity with the Uyghur Muslims, the Falun Gong, any religious minority, including Catholics who want to be loyal to the true church and not the state church. So that is just a brief introduction. After the when you look at that in the larger, when you step back and then you look at the virus being unleashed on the world, it definitely appears that the Chinese are at war with the best in Western values and the best in humanity, and not just on their own people.
Well, Gualberto, let's talk about a couple of other of the biggies. Forced abortion, which has always been part of the communist regime, and organ harvesting. It's one of the most gruesome practices in the modern world, but it still takes place. And I think a lot of those people that Nick was talking about who are in these detention camps, that's where they get a lot of these organs.
Right, and from their political prisoners, they have many political prisoners. Unfortunately, it seems we've began to take a page out of their book with what happened on January 6th. And all the people that are languishing in our prisons. But imagine if those people that are there are not only being detained without charges, but they're having their organs harvested. That's what happens in China. And in terms of the forced abortion, there is an incredibly horrific, tragic documentary called One Child Nation. It was nominated for an Oscar, I think in 2019.
Absolutely must watch that.
It's streaming on Amazon Prime. So you can.
I don't know for how long.
Right. Maybe they shut that off during the Olympics. That's the type of stuff that China is doing. The type of control they have. But I would recommend all of our viewers go and watch that because it's incredible. I'd say it's from even a pro-abortion point of view. So it's an American Chinese lady who goes back to visit her family there, and she's not opposed to abortion. She's opposed to the coercive nature of it, but just the way that they do it, the absolute brutality with which they exercise their power is really remarkable, just incredible. And to think, that we've had this whole debate about voting rights. The left right now wants to push; they want to eliminate the filibuster in order to get to guarantee voting rights, which we all know, is really a code for dismantling voter integrity laws. But in China, people don't get to vote, right? Like. Where's the outrage from the corporate media about that? Are they going to say a peep about that? I bet they're not, and that's just incredible.
Well, right. In China, there are no human rights. There are no civil rights. It's like how many McDonald's do you have to open in Shanghai before you stop torturing your people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And Nick, let's talk about how sophisticated the Chinese propaganda arm is, because I think most Westerners don't understand how they are being manipulated.
Yeah, they have their hands very deeply in every large organization. They've penetrated, the corporate media, big tech. We know that they have, people there. They have ownership in all the emerging platforms on social media, whether that's things like Grindr, now Getter, the supposedly free speech platform has some links to China. So you start looking more deeply into, and that's to say nothing of like Facebook, Google, and some of these larger big tech companies who have relationships with the media and larger corporations that the Chinese are able to leverage.
And let's talk about how that works. So somebody goes onto Twitter and says something critical of China, and then all of a sudden they're inundated with all these pro-China comments below and that kind of thing.
That's right. They actually have centers in China where they pay, basically pro-CCP propagandists to look for, find these sorts of comments or whatever might be trending that might be against China, and then all of a sudden put out all these pro-Chinese statements. So it gives the impression, the illusion that, everything's great in China. They're going to create a new narrative that China is, fostering peace and harmony. It's this booming place. We all got to go there. There, all these human rights abuses, they don't really happen. Let's not look at that. Let's not examine that. Let's, pro-China. China is great. And this goes to your point about human dignity. There is no human dignity in China. The only dignity that matters is the CCP, and that's all they care about. It's all CCP all the time. And if you get in the way, you get eliminated.
Yep.
And that's what they're doing in social media, and between that and the prison camps and so forth.
And Gualberto, we can't have this discussion without talking about the fact that the Chinese Communist Party basically runs the Catholic Church in China.
It's incredible, to think that they get to pick the bishops. But the most incredible thing is, and Nick was talking about the infiltration that they've done with institutions. They must have infiltrated the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church agreed to this, right? Pope Francis. It's one of the first things. I think I was very hesitant to doubt the Pope as a faithful Catholic for a while, and I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back with me when we saw that the Vatican under Pope Francis was willing to throw faithful Catholics under the bus in China and to allow the Communist Party, a party that believes that God doesn't exist, to actually pick the bishops. It's incredible. But it gets even more scandalous than that, because we know who Pope Francis sent to China to negotiate all of this, right?
None other.
That paragon of morality, Cardinal McCarrick.
Yes.
Right? The child abusing cardinal. And so it's really incredible. I am positive that the NBC and company, they're not going to mention any of these abuses. And so instead of covering any of the amazing feats of the athletes, and I love sports, I wish I could watch the Winter Olympics. I could watch a figure skating with my daughter, and the bobsledding, which we never get to watch other than
that's
2
right.
minutes.
And I got to tell you, my wife's niece is married to the United States bobsledding coach.
Okay,
Mike Kahn. Mike's a friend of mine. I was just texting him.
How terrible is that, right?
It's like. Right.
They have to go to China, where they have current outbreaks of these diseases, where they're going to have to probably take burner phones.
They do. That's what Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said. The first thing that they do is put their phones to the side. They all get burner phones whenever they made the trip to China, and they get there, and there you go.
And so these athletes work their tails off, especially in sports like that don't have a huge following, for 4 years, for their whole lives, really. And now they have to go to a communist country where they don't even have the freedom to speak.
Many of them will be tailed. Many of them will be, spied upon while they're there for doing nothing other than pursuing their sport.
Right. Mm-hmm. So I'm so glad that LifeSite is going to be publishing at least a story a day during the Olympics. So this is going to be our coverage of the Olympics. Our coverage in solidarity with the people of China, with the people of the world that are suffering under communism. We're going to be exposing every angle possible during these 2 weeks, from the 4th to the 20th. And I know you're going to be doing some great interviews. We're looking to interview some people on the Hill about this. So stay tuned to that. I think people need to wake up, because it's a real problem, and the depth of the penetration that they've had into our corporate media, into our government, is incredible, into our church. Yeah,
you mentioned January 6th and the injustice of these people who literally walked into the Capitol. I know I was there. Many of them did get out of hand. I witnessed it. I got it on tape. But most of these people who are languishing in prison right now, not getting due process, they walked into the Capitol.
Right.
That taxpayer-supported building, right? But you know what, Nick? That morning, I went out and I shot my story for LifeSite. I was covering January 6th that day, as was Gualberto. And the story that I focused on, I didn't know what I was going to cover that day. But the night before, I had seen this convoy of Chinese, hundreds of cars, and they were having a gathering, and they were there to protest the nomination of Joe Biden. The next day, by far, the largest minority group were Chinese. I don't know how many of these were Taiwanese, but I can tell you, many of them couldn't speak English. These were Chinese nationalists, Chinese students from America who had come here to protest Joe Biden because they knew all about Joe Biden and what he did with Obama and Hunter Biden and that whole dirty history that Biden had by accommodating the Chinese and doing their bidding, by the way. And it was really one of the most powerful assignments I've ever had because they came up to me like they were wanting me to interview them and speaking in their, the best way they could to express, how we had to stop communism in this country because they had seen by the way that our government was responding to COVID, they saw communism, Nick.
Yeah. Yeah, and it takes a ton of courage for the Chinese specifically to speak out. Here locally, we have a contingent of Chinese at a Chinese school, and I know firsthand that whenever there's the subject of China comes up and there's criticism of the government of the CCP. I mean, they're afraid in an American school, thousands of miles away. Yeah, they're afraid that somehow whatever they say in that American classroom is going to leak back to China.
Yeah, and they went on the
incriminate
record
them and their family.
Yeah. Right. They went on the record with me that morning. I thought of that. Like they could get in trouble for this.
Absolutely.
Well, definitely, especially their families. This is one way that the CCP, they have hundreds of thousands of students, probably millions of students in the U.S.
Yeah.
And the way that they make sure that they don't stay here, and the way that they make sure that they stay loyal to the CCP is by exerting pressure on their families.
That's exactly just what Cuba. I was the director of a group 20 years ago called Americans for a Free Cuba, and I got to know former Cuban political prisoners and their families. That's the exact same way that they operate. Yep.
And that's what they're doing as well in the Xinjiang province, I think is what it is, in the northwest of China with the Uyghur Muslims, is they will allow one family member to go over to Kazakhstan or to another country, but meanwhile they take the other family member's passport, confiscate it, and keep them stuck so that person is forced to come back. They have some leverage and control over the individual.
And guess what? If you step out of line, your dad loses his job, your siblings can't go to school, and that's how it works. Gualberto, I want to ask you something. I heard you briefly have a conversation with my colleague Alejandro Rodriguez during the March for Life, and I just heard a little bit about it, but it was so moving for me to hear you tell your story about why you love freedom so much, because you're an immigrant to this country.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's America is the land of opportunity, and when my family came, we're the kind of typical immigrant story, right? Where we had a couple $100 in our possession, and my parents were able to go to school, get an education. We grew up watching every penny. We did farming and sold produce at a farmer's market to make it to the end of the month. And never did I get anything but help from local people, the desire for us to succeed and to do better, and just the sheer the spirit of opportunity that's in this country. And unfortunately, I think that's under attack. And so the kind of the polar opposites that we see in the world traditionally was the United States and the Soviet Union. I think that polarity has kind of shifted a little bit now, and it's the United States, part of the United States, and China. And so to me, the greatness of this country, the opportunities, the freedom, the openness, I wasn't always a faithful person. I had my, my rebellious youth, and but the ability to actually experience these things with freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, allowed me to learn from my mistakes and then choose a better path. And unfortunately, that's the type of thing that I see diminishing with the cancellations, with the censorship, and just with the rampant Marxism that we see all around us. So, I want to fight this. I think the U.S. is the last beacon of hope for this way of life. I think most of the world agrees. Of course, there are great people everywhere. There are strong movements in Canada, in Europe, in Australia, all over the world, in China even, with all the danger that entails. But the U.S. really has always been that force for good. With all our faults, with all our moral blemishes, we have been that force for good, and good has been allowed to flourish here. And so, I'm going to continue to fight for that. That's what I love doing. That's what I think LifeSite stands for as well. And part of that is solidarity with the people who are suffering in China, not covering it up because we want a better, sneaker deal or whatever it was that LeBron, gave into, or Google and Facebook, complying with censorship. No, we're not going to do that. We're gonna cover, with all the truth that we can muster, all the abuses that are happening in China. So I'm just, so happy to be doing it, and let's see what happens.
That's good.
I love hearing your story, Gualberto. Nick, I got to be honest with you. The reason why I don't want to watch the Olympics is that because it sickens me. The same reason why I don't watch the NFL. I didn't watch the playoff games yesterday, and I spent most of my professional career as a television sportscaster. I've covered Super Bowls and all the playoffs, all the big events. I grew up, sports was my life.
Wow.
I cannot watch anymore when they kneel for the national anthem.
Yeah.
And to think that we're going to be seeing our athletes taking a knee. I mean, just growing up, that was one of the proudest moments when I grew up in the 60s and 70s. And you had the Cold War, so you had the Russians over here and the East German women swimmers with hair under their arms, because they were all taking steroids, right? And it was just like this real epic confrontation that you had. And we always did so great in the Olympics. And when you saw our athletes standing there with their hands over their hearts, singing the national anthem proudly, and then to think what in the world has become of our culture, that it's okay to take a knee on an international stage and disgrace your country.
It's awful. I feel similarly. I have the same level of juice for hockey that you have for all sports.
Right.
And growing up as a Chicago Blackhawks fan, my favorite experience in the world was going to a game with my family and being there for the national anthem, because the crowd just went nuts. They went nuts.
Right.
And in fact, I did a little bit of a deep dive, and the old Chicago stadium was 10 times louder than any other stadium in the hockey league. And so it was just that crazy. And even listening to it on the radio as a kid, because they didn't broadcast the home games, it's another story. But the idea is that you would hear these people just going nuts and slamming the wall, as soon as the Star Spangled Banner gets to that peak. And so to see where we are now, it's a totally different world.
Yeah,
well,
it is.
I'll tell you something though, just so that we're not too pessimistic.
Sure.
Okay.
We still have certain sports where the anthem is still played before every meet. I've never been a swimmer, but one of my kids is a really good swimmer, and before every swim meet they have the national anthem, and it's a good 95% of the people that put their hand over their heart and salute the flag.
That's good.
And that's such a good thing, because it's not about brainless nationalism that that in some way it looks down upon other nations. It's about being proud of who you are as a country. And our country, has many different peoples, many different religions, races, all that. But at some point, if you're going to be a nation, you have to come together. And the national anthem, to me, that's what it represents.
Well,
Absolutely.
and it's never any problem for athletes from the other countries to show national pride.
That's right.
They should.
Only us, right?
Yeah.
Yes, we don't want to cheer for America too much. Okay, so we're going to have Nick. I know you're going to be writing some articles for us here in the next couple of weeks, because we're going to be dropping some truth on the communists.
That's right.
Right.
I'm sure they'll appreciate it very much.
Yeah, you know what? They'll probably be reading this stuff, Gualberto.
Probably, and if our website goes down,
Now you know why.
You probably know why.
That means we're doing a very good job.
Yeah.
So.
Right, yeah. Well, the censors have been after us before, but we always find a way to bounce back, don't
Absolutely. We've got a great team all around, from our IT guys to you and the video guys, our reporters. I'm just so proud of everyone. And we're going to keep doing this. And the fewer people that do it in the mainstream media, the more people that are going to come to watch our coverage. And so, you know, if you want to know what the CCP has been doing in, you know, we have 16 days during the Olympics. I wish we had 100 because they've done so much.
We could take a year.
Yeah.
And we
Right.
still would just.
We could do this every day.
Yep.
So we're going to highlight this and really show the world the harms of the CCP.
Yep.
And maybe it makes a little bit of a difference in the lives of the good people in China
Yep.
who want freedom, like everybody else.
Well,
And they need someone to speak for them.
That-
you know.
That is the truth, because you know, it's like Whitaker Chambers said, you know, every soul is continually striving for the condition of freedom, and without freedom, the soul dies, and that's what happens to a people. You're seeing it in America. You're seeing it in Canada. You know, with all the tyrannical COVID restrictions, they're trying to crush the soul. They're trying to crush the spirit of people.
It's amazing to see the level of nationalism that has risen up during this whole trucker protest. It's been fabulous, and it's been heartening as an American to see.
Yes.
Because it takes a ton of sacrifice to drive wherever in the freezing cold, show up in Ottawa, make demands, and say, we're here.
Yeah, I was glued this weekend to John Henry Weston's coverage of the trucker protest in Canada. They were out there in the sub-zero temperatures, chronicling these people, these men. It was almost like you were watching oppressed Chinese people, Gualberto, just speaking up finally, because they're nice, polite Canadians, but they've had enough.
If we don't push back now, we will be oppressed Chinese, like the oppressed.
Well, you know what? I'm glad that you're hiring tough guys like Nick Marmalejo. He was just telling us a story a little earlier about facing down a Chinese general who actually happened to stop off at a coffee shop here in Front Royal.
It was the most bizarre thing. It was very surreal, right? Because it was the last thing you would expect on a Saturday morning. I think I was heading to Lowe's for some oddball project that I had going on, and I was like, you know what, I'll grab some coffee. And so I zoom right in there, and there's this like perfect spot. I get it. I look and I see a bunch of Chinese soldiers in uniform. I'm like, this is weird. Okay. So I was like, okay, whatever. I'm going to get out. You know, maybe, you know, we're 70 miles from DC. It's not unusual to have, you know, people coming back and forth. So I get out of my Jeep, and I'm looking very much like a weekend mountain person, you know, with the
Because you are.
There is that, yeah.
Right, yes.
This is just a disguise. So I step out and I turn on the sidewalk to go towards the door, and there is this really short Chinese general. I think he was a general. I mean, he had the bar. I mean, you know, I've seen military before.
Yeah.
He was definitely decorated. You know, he was important. He was the man, the honcho there on site. And he gave me the most cold glare stare. He stared me down, and the thing that quickly went through my mind, as I was telling you guys earlier, is that he had just got out of a briefing about the type of people in America who would resist him, and I was the cardboard cutout, you know, in that presentation, and there I am here at Starbucks, and he just gave me that cold glare, and I just knew instantly, like, if we were in his country, I would, you know,
disappear.
I would be disappeared, and you know.
But little did he know you were packing at the time.
Yeah, I was, actually. So it could have been an international incident. But you know, with censorship being what it is, you've never heard about it. I wouldn't have been able to tell my story. I would have, you know, probably.
No, you would have been the bad guy in that. But I'm great. You know, we also have Kennedy Hall, who's like a martial arts power lifter guy. We got this guy Nate Stringer. He's a big old boy. So we're really starting to get some bouncers on the staff now, Gualberto. I love it.
That's right. It's a return of masculinity.
Yes, indeed. I'm going to interview Kennedy on Thursday about his new book on masculinity. I can't wait to do that. But gentlemen, thank you both for coming by. This is a serious topic we're discussing here today.
Absolutely.
And, you know, I don't know. I might have to watch some of the bobsledding because it's family for us. Mike Kahn is a great guy, good Catholic guy, I got to tell you. Loves his country. You know, Army reservist, one of the best men I've ever known. So go American bobsled team.
All right.
But we do need to pay attention, and we need to be speaking out about the true nature of the communist regime.
Absolutely.
And that is causing more pain and suffering in this world right now
Right on.
than anybody else. So
That's absolutely true.
thank you, men. Please be watching LifeSiteNews.com and come right back here for some videos. We're trying to get an interview with the great human rights member of Congress, Chris Smith from New Jersey. And I know you will be, when Chris Smith speaks about human rights, you've heard something amazing. So we'll have that for you. So God bless you. And you know what? Since it's Olympic time, God bless America.
Amen.
Oh,
Amen.
Canada too, I guess. But, you know, right. Bye-bye, guys.